You ever notice how the world only applauds victory, but studies survival in silence? That's the funny part. The headlines celebrate the winners. The people in the shadows study the one person who refused to disappear when every door was locked, every alley was gone, and every prediction said it was over. They expected panic. You gave them patience. They expected emotion. You answered with discipline. They surrounded you with pressure so intense that an ordinary mind would have surrendered long before the first move was made. Instead, every step you took became another problem they couldn't solve. The strangest thing about pressure is that it doesn't create character. It reveals it. Most people spend their lives preparing for moments that never come. Then there are the rare few who are thrown into chaos without warning and somehow become calmer as everything around them falls apart. That's the kind of story nobody wants to admit exists because it destroys the comforting lie that greatness always comes from perfect circumstances. Imagine becoming the person your enemies accidentally respect more than your friends ever did. Imagine making decisions so precise that people who spent decades mastering strategy start asking themselves how someone with no title, no permission, and no guarantee of success could see the board more clearly than everyone else. Power has always feared one thing more than strength. It fears someone who cannot be manipulated. A person who has already accepted loss cannot be threatened. A person who has already embraced uncertainty cannot be controlled. That's when every tactic begins to fail, one after another, until the people who built the game are forced to study the player they thought would never survive. History isn't always written by the strongest. Sometimes it's rewritten by the last person, still standing after everyone else has walked away, convinced the battle was already finished. Pressure has a strange sense of humor. It walks into a room like an executioner, convinced it already knows the ending. It whispers to everyone watching, "This one won't last." The crowd believes it because they've seen people fall apart before. They've watched confidence evaporate, promises dissolve, and brave faces crack the moment reality arrives. Pressure feeds on expectations. It loves introducing people to the version of themselves they spend their entire lives pretending doesn't exist. Most people think courage is loud. They imagine speeches, applause, dramatic gestures, and heroic music playing somewhere in the background. Reality is much uglier. Real courage usually looks like silence. It looks like someone standing completely alone while every voice around them predicts failure. It looks like making one clear decision after another while fear keeps banging on the door, begging to be noticed. The funny part is that pressure never invents weakness. It only removes the mask hiding it. If panic lives inside you, pressure will put it on display. If discipline lives inside you, pressure will reveal that instead. The world calls it talent because admitting the truth would force people to accept something uncomfortable. Greatness isn't born when everything goes right. It's exposed when everything goes wrong. Watch people when their plans collapse. That's when the performance ends. Some start blaming circumstances. Others blame luck. A few blame everyone standing nearby because accepting responsibility feels heavier than carrying failure itself. They waste precious seconds searching for excuses, while reality keeps moving without asking for permission. Then there's the rare individual who treats chaos like an old acquaintance. No dramatic reactions, no desperate movements, no emotional explosion, just observation, calculation, action. Every heartbeat becomes another opportunity instead of another threat. That kind of composure unsettles people because it can't be explained by confidence alone. It comes from a mind that stopped negotiating with fear long before the battle ever began. Here's what nobody tells you. Fear never really disappears. It simply loses its position at the steering wheel. It's still sitting in the vehicle, still talking, still making predictions about disaster. The difference is that someone else is driving now. Discipline grabs the wheel. Logic chooses the direction. Purpose controls the speed. Fear becomes nothing more than background noise, pretending it still has authority. People often confuse comfort with strength. They believe easy victories prove superiority. That's adorable. Comfort has never produced legends. Comfortable people protect routines. Dangerous people protect principles. The first sign of resistance sends ordinary minds searching for exits, while extraordinary minds begin searching for possibilities nobody else can see. Pressure doesn't care about your reputation, your promises, or the stories you tell yourself before the storm arrives. It only cares about one question. When everything you've built starts shaking, who are you without the applause, without the certainty, without the illusion that tomorrow owes you another chance? That's the moment the mask falls away, and whatever remains is the only truth that ever mattered. Most people believe their actions disappear the moment they're finished. They think a decision lives for a second, succeeds or fails, and then fades into memory. That's because they only see the surface. They never notice that every remarkable decision leaves behind a pattern. Patterns become habits. Habits become principles. Principles become lessons that strangers study long after the original player has left the board. The amusing part is that the people watching you are rarely the ones clapping for you. They're measuring you. Every calm response under pressure forces them to rewrite their assumptions. Every unexpected move exposes another flaw in the system they trusted. They aren't fascinated by your victory. They're fascinated by the fact that you solved a problem they didn't even realize could be solved. Ordinary minds repeat instructions. Extraordinary minds question the instructions before making the next move. That's why predictable people are easy to defeat. Their decisions arrive exactly when everyone expects them. They confuse routine with intelligence and consistency with mastery. Then someone appears who ignores the script entirely, and suddenly years of certainty begin collapsing in front of everyone's eyes. There is something deeply unsettling about watching a person remain 3 moves ahead while everyone else is reacting to the first one. It creates doubt. Doubt spreads faster than fear because fear attacks the body, but doubt attacks judgment. Once judgment begins to crack, every confident decision becomes hesitant. Every strong plan starts collecting unnecessary revisions until opportunity quietly slips away. People with authority often assume experience guarantees superiority. Experience certainly teaches valuable lessons, but it also builds invisible prisons. The longer someone succeeds using one method, the harder it becomes to imagine another. They become loyal to yesterday's victories instead of tomorrow's possibilities. Then someone arrives with fresh eyes, unconcerned with tradition, unrestricted by old assumptions, and suddenly the impossible begins looking surprisingly practical. Notice how true strategists rarely waste energy proving they're the smartest person in the room. Intelligence doesn't need applause. It needs results. While everyone else is busy announcing their brilliance, the real thinker is already studying weaknesses nobody else noticed. Silence becomes a weapon because it allows observation without distraction. The loudest voice usually hears the least. Every decision you make under impossible conditions becomes evidence. Not evidence that you're lucky, but evidence that your thinking follows principles strong enough to survive uncertainty. That's what captures attention. Success earned in perfect conditions teaches very little. Success earned while everything is collapsing forces people to ask better questions. Soon the conversation changes. They stop asking why you survived and start asking how you saw what they missed. They stop dismissing your choices as coincidence and begin treating them as examples worth examining. Every move becomes a blueprint. Every calculated risk becomes another chapter in a lesson they never expected to study. Because excellence has a strange habit of turning ordinary moments into standards that others spend years trying to understand. Control is the sweetest illusion ever sold. People spend their entire lives believing they can command others with fear titles, money, or authority. They build systems, write rules, create consequences, and convince themselves that everyone will eventually bend. It works most of the time because most people are terrified of losing comfort. They obey before anyone even asks. They surrender long before the first real challenge appears. Then someone enters the game carrying almost nothing. No guarantee of success. No promise of safety. No obsession with approval. Suddenly the rules begin to lose their magic. That's the moment power starts asking uncomfortable questions. How do you intimidate someone who already accepted uncertainty? How do you threaten a person who stopped measuring life by convenience? The old methods become decorations instead of weapons. Fear has always been the favorite tool of control. It whispers about failure, embarrassment, rejection, and loss until people voluntarily build their own cages. The remarkable part is that the cage is rarely locked from the outside. Most of the time, the prisoner keeps holding the key while convincing themselves escape is impossible. They become loyal to limits they never bothered to test. The truly dangerous mind doesn't eliminate fear. It simply changes the relationship with it. Fear speaks, but it no longer gives orders. Doubt appears, but it no longer decides direction. Anxiety knocks at the door, but it isn't invited inside to rearrange the furniture. Every emotion is acknowledged without being promoted to leadership. People mistake emotional control for emotional emptiness. They imagine strength means feeling nothing. That's a misunderstanding. Real strength is feeling everything and refusing to become a servant to any of it. Anger can exist without becoming revenge. Sadness can exist without becoming surrender. Pressure can exist without becoming panic. Every emotion becomes information instead of instruction. This confuses those who depend on predictable reactions. They expect insults to create rage. They expect obstacles to create frustration. They expect betrayal to create recklessness. Instead, they encounter someone who responds with patience, calculation, and precision. Every failed attempt to provoke creates another layer of uncertainty. The manipulator slowly becomes the confused one. There is nothing more unsettling than facing a person who cannot be baited into abandoning their purpose. Every distraction loses value. Every psychological trick becomes another wasted move. While everyone else is busy reacting to noise, that person quietly continues advancing toward the objective with steady determination. Freedom begins long before circumstances change. It begins inside the mind. The day you stop asking permission to think clearly is the day invisible chains begin breaking. The day you stop negotiating with every fearful thought is the day your decisions become your own again. Control over yourself quietly replaces the desperate need to control everyone else. That's why the strongest people often appear ordinary at first glance. No dramatic speeches. No constant need to prove themselves. No addiction to recognition. Just calm decisions repeated consistently while the world keeps searching for a weakness that no longer determines the outcome. Because the hardest person to defeat has already won the battle no one else could see. The one inside their own mind. Everyone expects strength to announce itself. They look for louder voices, bigger armies, heavier weapons, and grand displays designed to intimidate before the first move is even made. That's the performance people pay to watch. It's comfortable because it's predictable. When someone looks powerful, everyone prepares for power. Nobody prepares for the quiet mind sitting in the corner, studying every habit, every assumption, every blind spot with a smile that reveals absolutely nothing. Predictability is the invisible chain most people willingly wear. They wake up thinking the same way, reacting the same way, making the same choices, then wonder why every challenge already seems to know their next move. Life isn't reading their mind. Their patterns are simply too obvious. Once someone understands your rhythm, they don't need to overpower you. They only need to arrive one step earlier. The amusing part is that people spend years sharpening the wrong weapon. They train harder, speak louder, and push faster while completely ignoring the battlefield inside their own thinking. A flexible mind defeats rigid strength more often than anyone likes to admit. Stone looks impressive until water quietly discovers another path around it. One crashes into resistance. The other reshapes the landscape without asking for permission. Watch what happens when someone refuses to follow expectations. The room becomes uncomfortable. People don't fear what they understand. They fear what refuses to fit into the categories they've already created. The moment your decisions stop matching their predictions, certainty begins slipping through their fingers. Confidence turns into hesitation because every previous calculation suddenly becomes unreliable. Most failures begin with the sentence, "This is how it's always been done." It's remarkable how quickly tradition disguises itself as wisdom. Just because a method survived yesterday doesn't mean it deserves tomorrow. Entire systems collapse because nobody dared ask whether the obvious answer was actually the correct one. Comfort protects habits. Curiosity destroys limitations. Real strategy isn't about making random decisions just to appear unpredictable. Chaos without purpose is nothing more than confusion wearing expensive clothes. Every unexpected move must come from observation, not impulse. Every change in direction must serve a larger objective. Precision always defeats panic. Thought always outlasts emotion. The best surprise is the one that looks inevitable only after it has already happened. Notice how people become trapped by their own confidence. They stop questioning. They stop learning. They believe experience has removed the need for curiosity. That's when decline quietly begins. The world changes while they continue using answers designed for problems that no longer exist. Meanwhile, the student who keeps asking better questions slowly overtakes the expert who stopped listening. The most dangerous advantage isn't physical power or endless resources. It's the ability to adapt before everyone else realizes adaptation is necessary. While others defend yesterday's map, you're already walking through territory they haven't even noticed. Every obstacle becomes information. Every setback becomes another adjustment. Every unexpected challenge becomes another opportunity to rewrite the game. Before anyone understands, the rules have already changed. Most people believe history belongs to crowds. They imagine that only massive victories, roaring celebrations, and powerful empires leave permanent marks on the world. That's comforting because it gives ordinary minds an excuse to stay invisible. If greatness requires perfect timing, endless support, and impossible resources, then nobody has to accept responsibility for the opportunities standing quietly in front of them today. Reality has a much darker sense of humor. Entire generations can be changed by a single decision made in complete silence. One moment of absolute clarity can outlive 1,000 speeches. One person refusing to surrender when surrender seems logical can become the story everyone studies years later. Not because they were the strongest, but because they proved that strength is often a choice disguised as persistence. People rarely recognize significance while they're living through it. They mistake defining moments for ordinary afternoons. They assume legendary decisions arrive with warning signs, dramatic music, and flashing lights announcing that history is about to change. Instead, history usually whispers. It appears disguised as one difficult choice nobody wants to make. Walk away or stand firm. Stay comfortable or accept uncertainty. Follow the crowd or trust your judgment. The fascinating part is how quickly today's impossible becomes tomorrow's standard. The same action that once looked reckless eventually becomes common advice. The same person who was criticized for thinking differently is suddenly quoted as an example of wisdom. Success has an unusual habit of rewriting old opinions without asking permission from the people who doubted it first. Every great stand creates ripples far beyond the original battle. Someone you've never met finds courage because they heard your story. Someone facing impossible odds chooses discipline because they learned what conviction looks like under pressure. Someone standing alone realizes they aren't the first person to face overwhelming resistance. Influence doesn't always travel through fame. Sometimes it travels through example. The world remembers outcomes, but it is transformed by character. Victory without integrity fades surprisingly fast. Achievement without purpose becomes another forgotten headline. People don't remain inspired by perfection. They remain inspired by resilience. They remember the individual who kept moving while fear was shouting, while failure was waiting, while every prediction insisted there was no path forward. That's why your final stand is never only about you. Every decision under pressure silently teaches others what is possible. Every refusal to quit expands someone else's imagination. Every calculated step through uncertainty becomes evidence that courage can exist without certainty and determination can survive without guarantees. There comes a point when people stop measuring your success by what you achieved and start measuring themselves against the standard you created. That's when your actions become larger than your name. The battle ends, but the lesson keeps moving from one generation to the next, carried by people who may never know where it truly began, repeating the same fearless mindset until an ordinary moment once again becomes the kind of stand that echoes through history long after the noise has disappeared.